We've started recording. We're here together again, all right, we're starting our recording. We're here together again with Healing Mama Hearts. Me and Janet like to get together, and we've invited Miriam today. We're so excited. Miriam was telling us a great story about how the struggles of feeding baby and all that, and we wanted to invite her on and just have a chat, like we've been doing. So just kind of want to talk about that and talk about how we want to support all the moms out there. And we would love to be able to someday get a place where moms can come when they're really struggling. That level 3 postpartum depression just would be amazing to have a place for moms to come and rest and get the care that they need. So someday, cross your fingers, we can get that going.
Until then, we're just going to support the moms with social media. And Miriam's one of my favorite people to learn from. I love it. She has so much. I wish that when I was having babies, you too, and I wish we would have done it at the same time because you guys know so much about this. I love it.
I feel like you both are good to me. I definitely look up to both of you for sure.
That's breaking up a little bit, isn't it, Elise?
Just a little bit, but yeah, okay. I heard.
Okay.
Yeah, awesome. So we're on just one last video for feeding baby, all the different ways that we can feed baby, and the guilt and shame that can that, because expectations are mean and they make it feel horrible when they're not met. So
yeah, especially when it's your first baby, it seems like you just don't know how your body's supposed to function, and everybody will tell you how their body functioned, and it's never hardly ever the same as somebody else's body. And I mean, not even just your first one. I'm sure that there's different experiences with tongue tie and different things with other babies. But Miriam, what was your experience with feeding baby and your challenges?
Yeah, it can be super challenging, especially like you said with the first. So this experience that I had shared with Elise that she's referring to, it was with my first. He's now 16, but he was my very first little guy, and I was super excited to have him. But he was born after a failed natural delivery. So I'd had a lot of medications in my body, and then when he was actually born by C-section, there was even more medicine. And so I didn't know at the time, and I don't think anybody really told me at the hospital. I don't think anybody knew what was going on, but my little guy just did not want to eat. For the first probably 48 hours of his life, he just wasn't interested in eating. And so that was a big concern at the hospital. They wanted to make sure he ate, and that I knew how to feed him, because my plan was to breastfeed, and I had this big mountain of expectation of what that would be like for me. And because I had struggled to get pregnant anyway, so having a baby, this was going to be, there was a lot of expectation. When he finally got in the hospital, we were done with the C-section post-op recovery type stuff. It was time to feed him, and I could not get him to latch at all. It just wasn't happening. And so I had gotten a lot of advice from people, and of course you've got all this advice swirling around in your head, plus I was on drugs of painkillers and stuff. So I didn't know who to ask or what to say, so I was trying to do what the advice was, which was tell the nurses to help, which is good advice, really good advice. But I didn't know that I had anxiety that would be attached to that. So me asking for the nurses' help was basically a I'm failing marker for my mind. So when the nurse picks my baby up and takes him out of the room, that's me giving up in a way, right? And so when I asked for the nurse's help, and she came and got him, and he began to fuss because he was hungry. He just didn't know what to do about it. She told him, "Oh, shut up." And she said it really nicely, but my poor little, very young, first-time mom mind was like, what are you doing? And so it amped up that anxiety that I was already having about failing mom, because here I'm letting my child go with someone who's going to tell him to shut up. It's weird because now I can roll my eyes and laugh at that, because I have been tempered by time and having had many kids and that kind of thing, that it's not such a big deal. That expectation of perfection is not so heavy. But at the time it was heavy on me. I wanted to do it right. So to have someone tell my baby to shut up was like, that was the worst thing, on top of my already feeling. I had the baby blues. The hormones hit me without any of my actual thoughts going on. I had a mess of hormones going on, where with the drop I had shakiness and that feeling of just not quite being myself, and it was really hard in the hospital. It was also a SARS outbreak, so I couldn't have support in the hospital because they didn't want anybody coming in and getting the kids sick. And so and the hospital was super crowded with moms too. And so it was very, very noisy, very, very busy. No one seemed to have time. And I just felt very overwhelmed in the hospital. So I wanted to get home as quickly as I possibly could. So after our post-op recovery and it was time to go home, the whole time in the hospital, we weren't able to feed. And the nurses had been giving him syringes and bottles. And so I had a lactation consultant come in from the hospital, and we got the baby to latch on for like 5 minutes. And then that was the only time he ate in the hospital with any kind of a natural latch. And so then we were sent home, and they gave us extra syringes and bottles to go home with. And I was like, I am not going to use those. You know, I had this idea in my head of this is how this, and so we got home, and I didn't even have a real breast pump, you guys. I had like one that I got from it was like a dollar store type thing. It was made of this really cheap plastic, and it was like a hand squeeze one. I got home and I needed to pump the milk out for my son. And I was like, I don't want to give him a bottle or a syringe. So I was stressing it out. Finally, my husband convinced me to give him just one last syringe, and that was going to be it. He went to bed that night, woke up at 2:00 in the morning screaming, and I could not get him to eat. I couldn't do anything to get him fed. And so I called my mom, and I will never forget how brokenhearted I was when she came over, mother of 8. And I was, baby girl. She'd helped with her own kids and grandbabies. I just knew she would have all the answers. And so I called her, and she came over, and she looked at me and she says, I have never seen this before. I don't know what to tell you. And everything in me broke, because again, this mountain of expectation plus the anxiety of, but you were supposed to be my last resort. You were supposed to be the last person I called, because I had this pride of like, I have to do this. I have to prove that I can do this. And so when I called my last resort and she says, I can't help you, I don't know what to do, I just emotionally broke. Yeah. Just everything in me broke. So my mom went home, but she couldn't help us. And I'm still got a crying baby. And I was, not to mention the fact that my husband also had come down with some mysterious illness. He literally could not get out of bed. And so I was completely alone, and it was very, very sad. I ended up half feeding him that with like a syringe and trying to nurse him. It was just a mess. And I was a nightmare person for like a whole week after that. But the lactation consultant, we went ahead and called them again. And with time, we discovered that they recommended a breast shield. And so I think one of the things that worked there was I didn't give up on asking for help, even though it was so hard for me to do. I think being a first-time mom, there's something about asking for help that can be sometimes really, it's tricky to know who to ask and who to, because you do get tons of advice, and it's hard to know which advice to go with. But the thing that was really hard for me was just to know how to ask, to be willing to say, I actually don't know this. I'm okay here. You don't have to, like, I had people who wanted to come in and do my laundry or whatever, and I didn't need that. But I literally needed help just feeding my baby, and I didn't know how to just come out and tell people, like, I'm struggling with that. I didn't tell anybody else. Like, I had friends, neighbors, lots of women around. None of them knew this. So I called the lactation, do the shield, which is like a plastic shield that you put on your breast, and it feels like a bottle to the baby. And so he'll respond to it like a bottle, and he'll actually, there's like a hole in it that he can get milk through that. And so we did that for 2 months. I weaned him slowly off of that breast shield by like kind of whipping it away and trying to get the latch again. And oh my gosh, it was so hard. But I was like determined, I have to breastfeed my baby because it's the best thing for them, and you're supposed to breastfeed and all that. And I had the milk, thank goodness, I had that, so that wasn't the problem. And then I went through the embarrassment again of being a first-time mom, of trying to breastfeed around people. My mom would come over or something, and I was just like, you can't see me doing this. Why did I do it to myself? But I did. I mean, I'm not embarrassed to say that happened, because I think there's probably a lot of girls out there who are just like, I don't know how I could breastfeed around. But that was a huge challenge for me, because I was trying to stay covered and yet see what was going on, because it wasn't going easily. And so I wish I could go back and tell my old self, breathe. If he doesn't breastfeed, it's not the end of the world. Let it go if it's not a big deal. Don't have to cover up all the time. Tell people to walk out of the room if you're uncomfortable. Breathe. Allow yourself the space to figure this out. And I wasn't doing that. So like people would walk in and I was just like, I'm sorry for being here. And I just had such a hard time accepting my role as the mother of this kid who's going to go ahead and feed him however he needs to be fed. And instead I was like, I'm supposed to be a breastfeeding mom. I'm supposed to be, So I had a lot of this pressure, of this expectation, which caused so much anxiety, restless nights of watching him sleep, because did he get fed enough? Is he going to be waking up in 5 minutes, so it's not worth it for me to lay down because he didn't get fed enough? There was just a lot of anxiety about whether it was enough, whether I'm enough, whether I could do it. And so then on top of that, he began to vomit everything I would feed him. So I would feed him and then it would all come back up. And this happened every time I fed him. And at first I thought, well, it's just because of the amount of breast milk that he's getting. Maybe it's just too much. And so we were trying to like get him to burp more and all that kind of stuff. But what I didn't know at the time, what I wasn't willing to admit to myself, first time mom cried again, was that he had colic. And I was afraid to ask anybody, do you think he has colic? Because I didn't want anybody to be like, you're such a first-time mom. All babies cry, all babies fuss. You should know that. I didn't want anybody to think I was being a weakling and that I wasn't able to handle the challenges of motherhood. So I was afraid to tell anybody that he was vomiting a lot and that he wasn't sleeping more than about an hour every night, and he wouldn't go to bed until super late at night. It was like 1 or 2 in the morning before he really lay down for a good solid 3 hours or 4 hours. And then he'd wake up again sick, crying and throwing up again. And I just, oh, that's just kids, that's just babies. It's really hard and you should just know it's hard. And it wasn't until he was much older that finally I opened up to a sister-in-law and I told her what was going on with him, and he would vomit up like it was like stringy and mucousy. And she said, that sounds like something's wrong with his tummy. And she recommended a chiropractor that she was going to. And I was like, I don't know how that's going to help. So I went to the chiropractor thinking, I guess she'll adjust him. But he didn't even touch my son. He adjusted me and worked with me and talks to me. And my son slept all night long that night for the first time. And then he wasn't necessarily cured after that. He had a stomach problem, but he began to sleep for a change and get more rest. And I think honestly, I just needed to relax. I just needed to relax for a minute. So my story, one of the things that Elise had mentioned in the last time that made me actually speak up, this is why I came out with this story, was not to tell all the woes of motherhood and colic and all that, because again, a lot of moms have this and a lot of moms struggle, was when she said, you're afraid to ask for help for the mental health part of it, because mentally by then I was like grated cheese. I just had nothing left. And my husband literally each time we went to have a baby afterwards was like, how are you doing mentally? Because it was a big challenge. But when she said, you're afraid to ask for professional help because you're afraid they might take the baby away, that was huge for me, because I hadn't ever said it to myself. I was afraid, but that was at the bottom of all of this other fear. Like all those other fears that I mentioned about like, well, I can't tell people this, or they'll think, well, come on, you should be able to handle it. The underlying fear was, what if they say you're unfit, you're not doing enough, you won't be enough, you're not doing this right, and you're admitting that you have a problem that we just can't put up with. Like, that's unacceptable for this perfect child. You're unacceptable. And so I thought, they'll take him. I never had said it to myself out loud in my mind. Like, I'd never put it in words. But when she said that, I was like, that is where that came from.
And
so
that can be from that can come from anxiety and depression too, that thought, you know.
Yeah, probably. It wasn't until years later that I actually got the bravery to see a therapist, to do with a relationship between me and a child. And I thought, well, I need help here. And I went and saw a counselor, and again had that fear rise up in me again. Like, what if they say, well, you're just being a really terrible mom, and that's why. But that wasn't what happened at all. And now that I've had experience with seeking how, I would recommend it to anybody who even has any idea that they might want it. If you're thinking about it, you probably could use it. And if you have the resources for it to get it, I would recommend it, or at least speak to somebody that you and love going on with you. And maybe they can help you find somebody that can help you. But now that I've had some therapy and help and things like that, it's nothing but help. They're not out to hurt you. They're there to help you reflect and to wake up like those kinds of thoughts in you of like, did you realize that this is where this is coming from? And like when you said anxiety and depression, just it helps so much for people to say, you're not the bad guy. You have this battle you're fighting here. It just helps so much.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And the more you hit it from people that could help you, the worse it got, because it turned into a shame thing at that point. When you hide it and hide it and hide it, it turns into a deeper, you know, it's just so much deeper when you
right.
can't just talk
Mhm.
to your friends.
And this is where I was hoping this video would go, was more about asking for help because, you know, we think that, oh, then this is wrong. They're going to take my baby away. And one of the things that Janet has pointed out in the past, and I want to reiterate that, is if you are worried about your baby, if you want the best for your baby, if you're trying to take care of that baby and yourself, then you will never be in that. They're not going to take that baby from you.
You're
Like,
not a bad mom.
you're not a bad mom.
Yeah.
If you bad moms don't think about their babies. Bad moms do things that hurt the baby by neglect and not caring for that baby, and would rather go out partying because the baby is weighing them down. That's bad moms. Good moms think about their babies and how they want to help their baby. And, you know, I wanted to talk about seeking professional help, and how it almost, like, to me, in my brain, it always feels like, okay, if I talk to this one person and if they don't have the answer, then I'm screwed. I don't have anyone else to talk to. And the thought that crossed my mind before we did this video was, what if we had or encouraged moms to seek help from 3 people?
Right.
You know,
Right.
tell yourself, how many people am I going to check with? I need to gather advice from 3 or 5 people. I'm going to talk to the doctor, this chiropractor, this person, and this person, and like of who you want to talk to and ask. And then when you get that information from one person, you say to yourself, okay, that's their opinion and that's their advice. What about this person? What about this person? And you just take in all that advice that you want, and whatever works for you, that's what you keep, because nobody's going to have the perfect answer for you. Nobody's going to know exactly what you're going through, because there's so much coming in, so many different problems, so many different aspects, so many different, every person is different, every baby is different. And so you have to research, you have to search for answers. And I think that if we just get it in our mind, okay, I'm going to do research by asking these 5 different people what they think, and if and that will give you leads. That's not even going to give you all the answers. Asking 5 different people is just the beginning. That's just the start. And it will lead you, it'll start to lead you in the right direction. It takes effort to get answers. And so you have to be willing to ask a bunch of people.
That is such a good point.
This group for that.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
And that can seem daunting. Yeah. Go ahead, Janet.
It's almost like we give ourselves one chance, and if that doesn't resolve it, never again are we going to speak up. And it just doesn't make sense because we get after our kids for doing that same thing, going, I applied at one place and they turned me down, so I'm not going to apply anywhere else, you know?
Yeah. That's a good analogy. Yeah.
I think it can seem daunting when you think it takes work or research, because when you're in that place of depression and anxiety, you don't have energy, you don't have wits left to figure it out. But if you remember that when you're talking to those people, they may not have the answer, but they might be able to lead you to someone who does.
Right.
Like my sister-in-law, she didn't have, she had resources, and that's what we're tapping into when we say talk to 3 people, because really what you're doing is plugging into their networks. And what that does is it actually does give you energy back, because those people will begin to feed into you as they hear your story and they know what's going on with you. And so you're not having to carry it all by yourself. So it's not as exhausting, and you will have strength again, and you won't have to be sitting there crying and saying, I talked to my husband and he doesn't know. And we've all done that, where we've made the list of how bad it is, right? Like this happened, and then the baby didn't sleep, and then this happened. And so now we what we're doing is, it's our anxiety and depression that's saying, these are the walls and you can't get out of it. And so we say this. But if we do that thing, I love what you said, Elise, about 3 people, because that breaks through. And I talked to one person, and it wasn't, because now it's like, but I have more I can do. I have more ways. One to get out of my anxiety and depression is knowing there's a back door. Like if I know there's someone I can call or someplace I can go, then I don't feel trapped. And so I love that. I think that was so inspired.
Yeah.
On a real basic level, I was thinking, Miriam, when you were talking about, your first time mom and you're trying to breastfeed, and suddenly the breasts, I mean, they've always been private area for you, and suddenly they're public property. And you're that right there. Okay. Trying to cover the baby up, the baby's, but yet you got to see what the baby's doing and have conversation and play like you got this, right? Everything is okay. All of that together could cause so much stress and anxiety that you wouldn't sleep, and that makes the depression and anxiety worse. But first time moms, they just like the whole shift about, okay, now these are tools. These are tools. These are not just like size A, B, or C. These are tools. And people come in and expect to see what you're doing wrong. And it's like, what the heck, Suddenly I'm just like out there exposed to everybody, not even just this little baby, but everybody. It's a big deal for a new mom.
Mm-hmm.
It is. My sister-in-law was struggling with her oldest almost the exact same way I was. But my mother-in-law went to go see her, and my sister-in-law was sitting there with her husband and her mother-in-law and her mom, and they were all sitting around her like it was a theater, and they were all saying, hold the baby here, do this, do that. And she was getting to where she was in tears, and it was a mess. And finally, my mother-in-law said to my sister-in-law, so this is my husband's mom and sister, right? And she finally said, how about just let's put our clothes back on, let's take the baby, let's go do something else. And when everybody left and went to bed and all that, and the mom said, okay, let's try this again, let's try feeding the baby again. And she sat her down, totally no clothes, no blanket, none of that fear of being exposed to the mother-in-law or whatever, in front of her own mommy. And she said, okay, let's just try this. And she got to take her time and do it. And I think that was a really good way to handle that for her in that moment. Each person is their own individual story. Some people are fine being on display or whatever. I struggled really hard with the idea of because one of my problems, I hope this isn't TMI, but one of my problems was I had copious amounts of breast milk, to where if he was feeding from one side or one side was being stimulated, the other side would literally squirt through clothing just across the room. And it was so difficult. Like that sounds so nice for people who couldn't produce enough milk, I'm sure. but it was so difficult because that breast milk would get everywhere. Every single feeding, I had to clean everything over again because sour milk is sour milk. It was so challenging. When I had my babies after that, I grew in my ability to know what to do and what tools I needed. I mean, I literally would just go ahead and just stick another thing on the other chest, and then, you know, it worked out. I was able to get it worked out, but I wasn't patient with myself. I didn't believe that I would have that time. I just didn't believe that. I was focused so much on this feeding has to go right. And what I've learned is babies are really resilient and they will survive a lot. And you can be patient with yourself and your body. And if you need to feed that baby some formula or something else, it's okay. That baby will learn just like you're learning, and it's okay. It's all okay.
Yeah, that is so true. That is so true. And just to be able to relax and go, it's not going to hurt the baby to have goat's milk for a while or formula. Like I think Elise was saying in one of the videos, you can walk into a store and you can go into the aisle that has the formula, and there are so many varieties, and you can look at the ingredients and decide which would be the most healthy, and you can find quite a bit. I mean, there are I mean, you know, way back when formula barely was an invention, a thing, maybe they had one or two different kinds, but they have so many different kinds. And so it's easier now to find something and go, okay, this isn't going to hurt my baby to do this. So many, and babies are resilient.
I think that there's like-minded people out there that, like us moms, who are like, you know, I know that breast milk is best, but then I have to feed him formula. There's people out there that have created formula knowing that because they wanted the best for the baby. There's so many options out there. Even you know, making your own breast milk, you're making your own formula. I mean, there's make it themselves, and I think that there are companies out there that have baby in mind to
absolutely
make the best for baby. And there's so many modern technology that it's been bettered and bettered ever, you know, over the years.
There's so many moms that have struggled that way that but Miriam, your struggles are really like they just compounded and compounded. And it's like, man, it's amazing that this guy grew up and he's 16 now. Is he not driving and amazing?
Yeah, he's gone. He's got a beard. It's crazy. But one other thing that I wanted to say too, that kind of was part of all of this, that maybe goes into this, is feeding baby. I think a lot of moms, especially if you're not well off financially, you know, first time moms, a lot of us are not doing very well financially. So one of the fears is formula is going to cost too much. Getting mental health treatment is going to cost too much. Asking for advice or help, and what if I get led wrong? And financial costs can be really scary. But if you will find who you trust that has resources, and thankfully you guys have internet nowadays. I didn't have, you know, we didn't have that when I was doing it. So, but there are resources out there for ways to supplement your income. There's WIC programs. There's so many other things that can help you with those costs, so you don't need to worry about it. And when it comes to getting the mental health therapy and help like that, start asking people where can I get free healthcare for mental health, especially as a new mom, because there are programs and stuff for that kind of thing that can help. But I think this Healing Mama Hearts thing is definitely one of the tickets that people need. We just need to connect with other women. I think it's a big part of it. It's open those resources and have other women say, oh, you're making your own formula. I tried this is a place to get this for cheap, or this is where you can try this. And resources and reaching out is so huge. And just scratching that itch of being able to say to somebody what's going on with you sometimes does a whole mountain of good.
You know, that's such a good point, Miriam. And I think the moms now have even more challenges than we did, because the fear, well, you had the fear of SARS, was it? And now the fear of COVID, just fear. in general is just huge. Fear of not getting the shot, fear of getting the shot, fear of this and fear of that. And it just makes our anxiety and depression so much more compounded. It's like, it's just the challenges right now and are just immense challenges. And that's why Elise and I and some other friends, we sat down and we're like, you know what? We want to support women. We want to build a tribe. And even though we're not in the exact same community, we can have a community on social media and we can have our communities. But I think that the more people will be willing, like you have been willing to make comments and stuff, even though they're personal comments on our Healing Mama Hearts. And that is so valuable because it gives other women permission. You know what? If Miriam can do it, I can do it. I can be truthful about what I'm feeling. And it brings another layer of healing for the person making the comments and reminiscing about the times that they had to go through, or even when they're currently in it right now. If they'll be truthful and honest, it brings another healing aspect.
Yeah.
To that person and to other people.
Yeah. So we just want to encourage everybody to reach out. Professional help it feels scary and daunting, but it's actually they're there to help us. And if you come across someone who isn't helpful, then move on and
find someone else.
The majority of them are wanting to help.
Sometimes you have to interview a counselor or a therapist. You have to ask them some questions on the phone and say, hey, could I sit and interview with you for a few minutes before we even start the clock? And if it doesn't feel like there's any connection, then I can go interview somebody else. Some therapists will let you do that, especially over the phone, you know, where they'll let you ask questions and go, hey, can you even handle this kind of problem? And they'll tell you what their credentials are and how many people they have dealt with that. And so, yeah, just keep searching when you have an issue. Keep searching and find something.
Yep, definitely. Well, thank you, ladies, for having us.
We need to do this more often because it's when we say goodbye, there's going to be things that I wished I would have said, things that Miriam wished she would have said, and things that Elise wished she would have said. It's just the way it is. So we got to do it again.
All right.
I want to thank you guys for including us and going out of your way. I know this was an unusual schedule for you, but I appreciate you taking the time.
It's perfect. Thanks, girls. I love it.
Yep. Thank you.